Also want to say, if you haven't hit the like or subscribe button, please do so. We would love for you to be able to know about all the different programs that we're offering. Hello, I'm Robert Johnson. I'm a psychotherapist and co-owner of A Better Way Counseling Service here in Vancouver. And I'm here today with Jamee Shermer, who is here to tell us about grief recovery and a particular program that she's starting. So Jamee is an advanced grief recovery specialist who lives in Vancouver. After getting her master's in counseling, she spent 15 years serving families and mentors at Big Brothers Big Sisters in Portland and Vancouver. She has a passion for seeing people walk in joy and freedom. And I know that working with grief is something that she is very skilled at and also has a great passion for doing. And so I'm going to just talk with her about what she does, what the grief recovery program is, and a special program that she's starting right now. So Jamee, I'm curious, how did you get started in grief recovery?
Yeah, so I was introduced to grief recovery a few years ago, going through just a difficult time in my life where I had a lot of financial struggle. And it was a challenging time, and I found this to be really, really helpful for me to let go of some of that pain that I had been experiencing. And what I have found is, I really enjoy helping other people to help find their freedom in this, so that they aren't always also like dealing with the constant pain or negative feelings that they have about their grief.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that, it's not just the loss of a person, it can be any loss that the program that you're involved in can be helpful for. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, it's for any and all losses. Anytime you go through a transition, you can experience grief, and what that does is it can bring up, feelings that you weren't even expecting. It can come out of the blue. And it's really, I love helping people to be able to identify that so that they can walk through it and then have greater release and able to be in the present moment in their lives.
So, from what I'm hearing you say, grief recovery, the program that you offer, it's not just about the loss of somebody dying or loss of a loved one. It can be any kind of grief that, grief is basically loss. So any kind of loss is what this program would be addressing. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. So anytime you go through a transition of any kind, or you have an expectation that was not met, you had hopes, dreams, and expectations that weren't met, can create a grief experience.
Yeah. Yeah, we see that in the counseling side quite a bit, that people are dealing with grief. And it can be something that might be seemingly benign, but it had an attachment for them.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. And so, I know you're excited about this new program. In our agency, what you're about to talk about, we hear about people struggling with this quite a bit. So tell me about the pet loss program that you're starting.
Yeah, so I have a pet loss group coming up next week, and really it came out of the grief recovery methods. So they noticed that people were really grieving their pets, and they might come to a grief recovery group, but then they felt minimized because it's just a pet. And so they created this specifically for people who were grieving their pet losses, because it gave them a safe place to be able to process that grief around pets specifically. And that really helped people to feel like validated and give them a safe place to process. And it's an action-based program that helps people walk through the pain of losing a pet. And it's a 6-week program. It gives you a tool to process that pain and isolation of losing a pet, because what often happens is people, when they lose a pet, they don't feel comfortable sharing, or maybe they have shared that they lost their pet, and people, well-meaning, might say something that was insensitive to them. and then it shuts them down, and then they isolate more because they don't feel safe to be able to talk about losing their pet and how impactful that is to them.
Yeah, I can imagine people hear things like, well, it's just a pet. Why aren't you over this now? Just get another one. They probably hear a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
A pet is part of the family. For many people, it is
Mhm.
as an important part of a family as anybody else, and the loss can be very significant. And we see that. And even counselors can be like, well, okay, let's talk about the real issues, instead of really giving that loss the breadth that it really needs to have recovery. And so I think it's really exciting that you are offering a program for that specific piece. And I know in my life, when I've lost pets, especially suddenly, it's pretty devastating. It hits really, really hard, and you really feel it, and more so than you might have even imagined. And so I'm curious about this. What's the difference between the grief recovery pet loss program and traditional therapy?
Yeah, so the Pet Loss program is really an action-based program to help people gain a tool to process that past, current, or future pet loss. And it's partially educational and partially taking action steps to move forward through that pain so it doesn't consume you. And then you're able to hold on to the good memories without that the bad memories being, whenever you think of that pet, those bad memories being the thing that comes up for you. You can hang on to those happy memories, those joyous memories with your pet.
And so, what do people gain from going through the pet loss program?
Yeah, so they gain, a new tool to continue to help them with future losses. And it helps you once you've gone through the process, then you can move through those future losses quicker than before, so that it's not, consuming you, that pain doesn't consume you. And it gives you the ability to, like I said, remember the good times. And you're able to talk about the pet, because sometimes what happens is that people, they feel that loss, they feel that pain, and then they push it down and they never talk about it. I was at an event just over the weekend, and people were coming up to me, and as soon as they started talking about their pet, they had tears, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's been so many years. I didn't know I still had this pain here. And often that could be, and you might know this, you could probably speak to this as well. It's like, if you just kind of push it down, it's still there, still lingering. But if there's not a safe place to let that out and talk about it, then it can stay there. And so this gives them some new language and knowledge about what grief is and what it isn't. So they can process that, and then it won't affect their lives so intensely moving forward.
Yeah, grief stays with us until we deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And come up at any point, and any loss can trigger other grief losses that haven't been resolved. And so the idea that they can really focus in on this particular loss and have the opportunity to work through it in a way that's not, lingering in the background, I think is a really positive thing. Is there anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah. So, also wanted to share, when we have multiple losses, they accumulate over time, and it can feel all consuming. So maybe you lose a pet, and then you lose a loved one, and then you move, or, go through a divorce, or, other things come up. And that emotional bandwidth gets full, like, of negative emotions. And this gives people an opportunity to reduce those negative emotions, to let go some of that pain, so that then they can fill their cup back up with the good stuff. And this is for anyone who has lost a pet of any kind. It's not just for, we traditionally think of dogs, cats, those are kind of the two, but also, any kind of pet, horses, birds, hamsters, rats, any little creature that you have creating an attachment to. It's for any pet loss.
Yeah, I mean, people growing up as children growing up on a farm, and you get to know this favorite pet that later becomes dinner, and
Exactly.
what a
Yeah.
tragedy you have to deal with. And I know people in counseling where that was the case. And I know that the traditional grief recovery program that you also offer can be for any kind of grief, any other kind of grief.
Yes.
And I know that that's also something that you do. But I'm very excited about the fact that you're doing this for pet loss, because we've had quite a few people come through our program, our counseling program, who are talking about this issue. And so it's nice to have a place to refer them to get extra help and being able to do a deep dive on this issue.
Yeah,
So thank
yeah.
you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And for people who may be finding themselves disengaged and not being able to focus in the present moment, maybe they're feeling sad or wanting to isolate, those are kind of all warning signs that you might be grieving. And if you also don't feel comfortable sharing that loss and afraid of being minimized, or that pain being minimized, and people saying well-meaning things, but that are not helpful things, that could be a clue that this might be a good fit for you.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will cut tape here.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and stop the recording for a moment?